lunchtime. I think most of you know Prof. Duffett. He is in the marketing department. Had a very fruitful year last year where he won the Faculty Teaching Award, and he won Researcher and Supervisor of the Year. So a lot of expertise. We're very proud of Prof. Duffett, and look forward to you sharing some of your expertise and experience with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sasha. I think the most important thing that happened this year was eventually I got my NRF rating. So, woo!
I forgot about that. Thank you. That's actually the cherry on the top,
That's
isn't it?
the cherry on the top. That's very, very difficult to get. But I think there's something that's even more difficult than that, and that would be the ad hominem applications. but we won't go there.
No.
Right. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. As I say, I am recording this meeting, and you have access to my PowerPoint presentation and just other resources. I was asked to speak about publication matters. So just to confirm that you can see my screen. That should be a PDF saying publication matters, writing for publication for students and staff. I won't be able to see a thumbs up. Sandra or Sasha? Okay, we'll just go. Oh, on hold. What's happening here? Gosh. Hey, Sandra. Yeah, I know I got kicked out now. Okay, I think I'm back
Okay.
now.
Prof. Okay, yeah, you're back now. We didn't hear from the start, so you can start
Yes.
all over again.
Yeah, I don't know. I just got kicked out, and I've got a backup internet. So let's just see if I have gone. Yep, you see I've gone. It's dropped me on the other internet. So I've got two internets going. Plug that back in. Okay, so I am back, Sasha.
Yes, you are. Thanks, Prof.
Okay, yeah, I was asking for confirmation, but I've always got two internets running at the same time, so just in case something happens, the MTN drops you sometimes, and so then I go to Cell C as my backup. So just to confirm, Sasha, as I was asking, can you see my screen? It says publication matters, writing for publication.
Yes, Prof.
Thank you so much. So I've adapted another presentation, and I was really asked to present on just a couple of matters on open access, selecting a journal, rankings like Q1, Q2, and a few matters like that. But you can't present those in isolation. I need to take you through a journey, and then all of these matters are embedded in the actual presentation. So you can see that I've presented a workshop called Writing for Publication for Students and Staffs 3 times, and there are YouTube videos, and you have access to that. So, so you can watch those, although this presentation is not exactly the same because I have obviously placed greater emphasis on the few areas that I was asked to speak about. So, firstly, we'll just start off by saying I don't consider myself a guru of research. You pretty much learn from each submission to a journal. You often get desk rejected, you get revisions. You have to go through the production process afterwards once they've accepted your article. And as you publish also with each new author, which very often is a postgraduate student or a colleague, so you learn from them. You also learn from collaborations locally and internationally. To date, I've published 51 journal articles, of which 49 were published since 2015, and the 50th one is about to be published, I'd say, in the next month or two. So even though I published quite extensively, I'm still consider myself pretty much of a novice because, you know, there are just so many fabulous researchers out there, and I'm still learning with every journal article. Um, so yeah, so that's my personal experience, but I have picked up a few tips along the way. So, you know, I will share these with you. Also, the reference list at the end of this presentation is good resource as well. And this workshop is mainly for new researchers. I'm not looking for the seasoned researchers. I don't know how much you would learn from this, but maybe you will still learn something. Um, there are a range of sort of writing for published topics that I'll cover. So publish or perish, type of periodical. I'm not going to look at the generic structure or the writing process, but I will look at blocks to writing and then emphasize on selecting the right journal because that's the focus, the peer review process, and dealing with rejection. I did write a paper on this topic so that you can access on ResearchGate if you are interested. So publish or perish, this is what we face as academics. What does this mean? Well, like many of us have just spent the last 3 weeks or month working on an ad hominem application, and if you're applying for full professor, you know that 50% of that application is going to be scored based on research alone. So if we don't publish, if we don't supervise, and we want to seek promotions, then you need to conduct research. So it is important in an academic field. CPUT pretty much used to be very much focused on learning and teaching, but these days there is a push to become more serious about research. And yesterday we had this whole NRF um, talk from the VC, and they're just stating how they want to grow research. Also, it's mandatory for postgraduate students. So many of us are supervising at master's level to submit an article and at doctoral level to publish an article. So from that perspective, it's very important. Just another question on my story. It is also difficult to balance your research. Initially, the first 15 years of my career was solely focused on learning and teaching. And I'd say the last, not even 10 years, I'd say about the last 10 years, I've started to become more interested in research. And it was difficult initially because you had a full teaching load and you were trying to do full research at the same time. So you're literally doing two jobs in one. You're working 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. But eventually you reach a stage where you can speak to your HOD and say, look, here, is there a possibility for relief because I'm doing two jobs now? You know, so I was fortunate enough to get a bit of teaching relief about 5 years ago, which has allowed me to focus more on research. But initially, you need to build a track record. So I've mentioned the PG students, also CPT conference committee. So if you want funding via the conference committee, they state that, as a junior lecturer for 3 consecutive years, on average, you need a 0.25 of research output units, which I will speak to you about in the next point. For a lecturer, you need half a research unit. For a senior lecturer, 0.75, associate professor 1, and a full professor 1.5 in order to qualify to apply. So that means that if you want to go on conferences and you don't want to have to pay yourself, and you want to secure funding, if you don't have research output funding yourself to pay for yourself, even then you still need to go through the vetting process. So it's important then to publish. So what is a DHET accredited journal output worth? It's worth one research output unit. And that unit, so if you publish one journal article in an accredited journal, you get one unit. That one unit is worth quite a bit of money to CPUT, around about 120 to 130,000 Rand. and it gets divided up into various sectors. But you as the author get 0.25 of that. So for every journal article you publish, you're probably getting between 25 and 30,000 into your cost center, which can be used for various things like conferences and helping your students, but not really much else. You can also use it to buy some equipment, but I mean, really, once you've got, 1 unit, then you can buy all the equipment you need with that money, and thereafter what you do with it. So it's very restricted as to what you can use it for, but if you have it, you can help others as well, your students and other people, and so it does come in handy. But how the unit is divided up, if you are a single author, you get that 1 unit yourself, so you would get your cut of that 1 unit. Um, but if you are two authors, it gets divided into two, and you each get half a unit. And if there's three, you each get 0.3, and so it gets cut up. If there's four, you each get 0.25. So that's why if you can publish with a lot of authors, it just means you're not going to end up getting many research units. So it's always good to try and do some individual articles, or with one other person gets you the best value for money for publishing. Just to on the side, book chapters, and we only found this out not so long ago, is how it works is if you publish, maybe if you present at a conference and then they publish it as a book. A book is worth, often they publish the proceedings as a book, is worth 10 units. And it's divided by the number of chapters from the DHET formula. So if you publish in a book and there were 10 presentations and there were 10 chapters in a book, it's 10 divided by 10. Each book chapter would get 1 unit, which then is like the journal article, which then would be divided by the number of authors. But if there's 20 chapters and there are 20 people presenting at this conference, those 10 units would be divided by 20, and each would be worth 0.5, which then would be divided by the number of authors, and so forth. So the bigger conferences you present at that are published at books and they have 40, 50 book chapters means really you're not going to get much research subsidy at the end of the day from it. Hence, my focus has actually always been on journals, because that's where you score the greatest amount of research output units. But yeah, that's just my personal preference. Other reasons for publishing, obviously, you may just want to make a contribution to existing knowledge. You may want to validate yourself as a scholar. You may want national, international recognition, build a reputation, build professional network, secure funding. Obviously, it looks good on your CV. And when you get an article accepted, there is quite a kick of that. And before I continue, I just want to show you a very useful resource that I'm not sure if many of you are aware of. And this is the CPUT research support, which I will be referring to a bit. Just by the way, if there is any questions, please just hold them till the end. So if we just go into the CPUT website and you click on library and you click on research support, here you will see a whole lot of useful indexes from obviously Sangu, the data management. You can access all the theses, the institutional repository for people that publish their work there. So it's quite useful. And the chatbot, I do not want help at the moment. So this, particularly the publishing, is what we're focusing on. So where to publish, open access vocab, DHE journals, list of ranked book publishers. But if you just click where to publish, you will see that it gives you a whole lot of other links: research funding, ORCID ID, accredited journals, predatory publishing, CPUT research, impact factors, and many. So if you click on each of these tabs, which we will click on some of them in a moment, it even talks about the open access route here. So remember this. So we will come back to some of these tabs. So it's a valuable resource. So just to recap, if you go into the research report and then you just click where to publish, it's going to give you all of these resources that you can explore. So I'll just close that for now, and we will come back to it as we travel through the various sections. Then just in brief, different types of periodicals. So seeing how to select the journal is, one of the topics. Let's just look at the different types. So first you get popular publications. So this is your typical consumer and business magazine, wide range of topics, short, generally bought for entertainment or education if you're buying a business market magazine. These days, a lot of them are online, lots of pictures and photos, move to online formats, staff writers, broad audience, no research value. But good to get exposure for your research. If you could get a piece in a popular press about what your research is about, it could then lead people to your publications. House journals is three categories. So you have external, internal, and mixed. So external is directly aimed at your external stakeholders, your shareholders, whereas internal would be mainly aimed at your employees, yeah, external, the general public, and mixed is both, if it's aimed at internal employees, shareholders, and the general public. So it generally provides institutional news and information. The CPUT bulletin, we used to have a physical magazine, now it's sort of moved online, would be an example of a mixed house journal. Again, it can be used to create publicity for your research projects, but it has no research value, but it can create publicity. Now, academic journals is what we are really interested in. They focus on very specific topics and they're generally quite long, 5 to 30 pages, provide great information, provides the latest developments on information, very specialized audiences, so academic students, researchers, scientists, professionals, industry specialists. There's different categories. So generally you can have an original research article, which I think is what most of us focus on. But you could also have book reviews, projects, technical reports, conference proceedings, case studies, review papers, and even letters. But we generally focus on, probably sometimes case studies, but mostly original research articles. And what's different about this category is that it's peer reviewed. So when you submit an article, and we'll speak about the peer review process later, it gets sent to a panel of experts, which could range between 2 to 5 people who give feedback and decide whether your article is noteworthy or not, or original enough to be published. Um, DHE subsidy, I've already spoken about this, but what is very important is that when we select journals to publish in, that it is on the DHET accredited list, because if it's not, the CPUT will get no subsidy for it. And often there's what's called an APC, the page fees that we need to pay. And if you have to pay fees and you don't get any money back, then it's not worth it. So again, if where to access this on the CPT library website, if we just click on where to publish and we click accredited journals 2012 to 2022, and here you're going to see a list of the accredited journal list for 2024, and I actually have put this list on your chat so that you have access to it. If I was just to open this list, it will take maybe a little while, or I think I may have already opened it. Here's the list. Oh, let's just move this around. Okay, so here's the list, and you can see these different indices above: Scopus, Norwegian, DOAJ, IBSS, Silo, World of Science, and then there's DHET. Collectively, how many journals? I think I calculated at 69,000 journals, which I think we'll speak about later. So you have a lot of journals to publish from. So it's very vitally important that from that list, from this list, you select a journal on that list. So you really have a lot to choose from. But we'll speak a bit more about that later, because not all the indices are the same. So then the last category, which Prof. Rampersad mentioned in her place at the faculty board, is that although we submit so many units for accreditation to DHET to get our subsidy, which happens like we only get the subsidy 2 years later, people are published in predatory journals. And sometimes it happens that a journal may be on a list, on the DHET list, but when you submit, it's the next year, it's been taken off the list and declared predatory. So there are ways around it by obviously selecting more reputable journals, but we'll talk a bit more about that later. But predatory journals exploit the publish or perish phenomenon that no academics need to publish. The problem is with them that they offer you little benefit if you publish in a predatory journal. We'll get to what they are in a moment. Some journals are not deliberately predatory, but they just happen to become due to maladministration, inexperience, or negligence. So they may have been on the DHET list, but through negligence, or you get an editor that's not so good and just accepts every paper they receive. Sooner or later, you may get declared predatory, especially if you charge in money to publish. So what are predatory journal characteristics? Well, obviously the main aim is to make money via their page fees, even if it's only $50. $50 times 10,000 is a lot of money. They make phony claims, so they've got high impact factors and site factors and high indexing. Meantime, they've got nothing. They publish poor quality papers, substandard or no peer editing or review. Few, if any, manuscripts or papers are rejected. Fast acceptance. These are the common practices. The harmful effects, though, it's a substandard peer review. Their website could disappear at any time, little exposure or low readership, few citations, and ultimately can damage your reputation if you publish in them. Where do you find these lists? Well, you find them in Beall's lists are example. Obviously, any journal that's not on the DHET creditor list does not mean they're predatory, but it is then not a journal that you want to publish. And if we just go out here and we go into where to publish again, and I think here you've got a list, a tab called predatory publishers, and here it gives you how can you spot, view predatory publishers, videos. It gives you Beall's lists, all sorts of things. Let's just go one back. So here it gives you a whole range of topics. Here's Capel's blacklist. So if you just click on predatory publishers, you want to know more. But rather than focus on the predatory publishers, it's better to focus on those that are accredited. You just want to, if possible, well, you definitely want to avoid those predatory publishers. So here's a link. So only aim to publish at DHET accredited publishers. Obviously, there are new journals up and coming, and it's difficult to get indexed. So maybe you may be like CPUT may have a journal that they're trying to launch, and it's not predatory, and you want to get it credited. So you need to publish for a certain number of years and meet a lot of other requirements before you get indexed. So sometimes you may just, out of compassion to get a journal indexed, you may publish in a few that aren't predatory, but they're not credited, but knowing that you're not going to get any subsidy for it and probably not much exposure. So the generic structure of the article I'm not going to cover because that's not the focus of this workshop. But you can watch a video in that regard. I'm just checking that, yeah, we're still fine in terms of the connectivity. So title, abstract, keywords, introduction, literature review, results, etc., conclusions. We're not going to cover any of that. It's not the purpose. And the writing process we're also not covering, but because it's not really the purpose of this, although maybe I can go through the writing process just in brief, but I'm not going to cover and then I'll pause and stop on other aspects. So yeah, the writing process, obviously the first step is before you start writing, you need to download the author's guidelines for that specific journal, because every journal is completely different in terms of what they require, the structure, the formatting, the referencing, the length, and other submission requirements are all totally different. So that's very important. For whatever journal you select, you need to look at the author guidelines. And I'll speak when selecting journals, later on I will speak about that in greater depth. So just the overview, how I write is I always start with my findings, my tables, my figures. I know what I'm finding. This is assuming, if you're taking it from a thesis or you've done the research and you've collected your data already, and now you're writing the journal. So the journal article. So I start with the figures and then I generally work backwards to the research methodology, the results, and the discussion sections, oddly enough. I don't start with the introduction, literature, and conclusions. You should have already done initial reading so that, in developing your research instrument, you would have created a proposal already. And the research proposal would have covered the introduction, literature review, and conclusions. And if you've done it in enough depth, and that's what I advocate my postgraduate students to do, is when they do a research proposal, I want them to do it in extreme depth. I want them to have 200-300 sources already in that research proposal so that I know when they get ethics approval, they don't need to worry about the literature. They can continue to look for more sources, but then they can go straight to getting their results and findings. Because once you know what you found, it's easier to know what literature to include. So that's just a quirk that I do. I never go from introduction and then right to conclusion. Um, do your proposal, get your findings, you know what you found, then do your methodology findings and table, and then you go back to all the literature elements because you know what you found, and then you can beef it up. And then lastly, obviously, you can work out your title and your abstract even last. Generally, my view is you cannot write from start to finish, but you need to decide what sequence works for you. And what I always do is, so even though I've downloaded the author's guidelines of an article, I download and read the most recent journal articles from that targeted journal, so I can get a feel for this journal. Yeah, I even always end up citing maybe one or two articles from that specific journal just to show the journal, look here, you don't want to excessively do that because that's a problem in their rankings, which we'll get to later as well. But a couple just to show them, look here, this article is relevant to you. So read, get a feel for the style and what the articles look like, what the topics even are. That's one very good way of selecting a journal is obviously besides the author guidelines is to just read some of them and find topics that are related to you. Also seek a constructive criticism from colleagues, experienced researchers, mentors, other academics. And then language editing is very important in your writing. There are a lot of tools that can help you, Quillbot and Grammarly these days, but now I've had an experience where I use Quillbot Professional, and I've edited something and then I've uploaded to Turnitin, and now it's saying everything I edited is picking up as AI, which I know I wrote myself, but because I use the editing software, so you just need to be careful of those type of things as well. But it's important to submit a journal article that doesn't have blaring spelling mistakes and language issues. So publishing from a thesis is not as simple as it seems. It's not just taking your thesis and cutting and pasting sections in, and here you've got an article, because you are limited by length. Most journal articles are 3 to 10,000 words. Also, a thesis is often, like the literature, is dated by the time it's gone through the examination. The literature is 2 years old, so you need to, or a year old even, so you need to conduct a fresh literature review as well. And so you should only extract the essence of your topic, which sometimes can be subdivided into 2 or 3 or 4 topics, depending on the nature of your research. So also you need to consider other factors such as the audience, who are the readers, the language, the originality, the significance of your findings, the methodology, how much detail can you give. There are some journal articles without length restrictions, but who wants to read a 50-page journal article? So most journal articles are somewhere, as I say, between 3 to 10,000 words, between 5 and 20 pages. Also, you need to, when publishing from a thesis, decide on the authorship. Generally, the student is the first author, followed by the supervisors, which second and third authors respectively. But there can be exceptions to the rule, but I won't even go into that because that can be another discussion. Yeah, most master students wait until they finish their thesis. Some do when they do their literature review, they try and write it up as their literature review as a systematic literature review, which is possible if you've done enough research. But most master students generally wait till the end because they only need to submit a journal article. Whereas a doctoral thesis, a doctoral candidate needs the article published, so then you are kind of forced to start a bit more early because you have to bear in mind that it can sometimes take 2 years for your journal article to be accepted based on which journal you submit to. So that's another important selection factor, is that if you are wanting to graduate as a doctoral student, you need to select a journal that publishes faster than slower. So yeah, so that's in terms of the article submission. Okay, we're actually heading towards the actual crux of the topic now. Just a few publication ethics. So generally, we use Turnitin to ensure that there's no type of plagiarism. At lower levels, we use Blackboard. Um, AI tools like Originality.ai and ZeroGPT, although, as Jerome will tell you, everything's changing so fast that these tools are probably becoming useless because there's so many cloaking tools and this and that. But nevertheless, it's still good just to run everything through whatever tools we have available. And then disclosure to the journal is important. So, yeah, I just want to, okay, carry on to a few other things here. So just a few, so the plagiarism is the typical problem, whether ourself or using other tools. Other problems is research data falsification. So with AI, it can create fake data quite easily. You're not allowed to submit the same article to 2 journals at the same time. That is unethical. Authorship, so often you get a whole lot of tag-alongs in a journal article. It happens at a lot of traditional universities, without naming names, but my wife can testify she ends up doing all the work and not even appearing on the research article at the end of the day. So these type of things happen as well, particularly when there's very senior profs involved. Um, Conflict of interest. So maybe you know the reviewer of a journal or something like that. Reviewer bias, yes. Confidentiality, you can't disclose your respondents and participants' names generally. So those are just factors to consider. Okay, we're heading towards the climax, the actual part, but this is just to give you background and context. Blocks to write in. So some of us may struggle to write. It's a new subject matter, unfamiliar structure, international audience, yeah, of international audience of academics and scientists may be quite daunting. So all of us experience academic blocks at some stage. To start writing, here's a few tips. Just write everything on one page. Brainstorm, this is what I want to do, kind of create a mind map. It can help. Or what I always tell my students is, if you just download journal articles and summarize one journal article a day, and I give them a specific format, if you do that for 100 days, it means you would have summarized 100 journal articles. Man, then you've got enough material to write a journal article pretty much. If you've summarized a journal article, you've extracted the research gaps, the research problems, you've extracted the literature, the constructs, the methodology, what are the research gaps based on the future, that's really a good strategy. If you're ever stuck, just download journal articles and summarize them, obviously related to topic. Yeah, when eating an elephant, take one bite at a time. So, just, yeah. And then also another strategy, write 250 words a day or 100 words a day. Again, over 10 days, it means you've got, 100 words a day, 1,000 words in 10 days, 3,000 in 30. So again, that's another strategy. Also, there are a lot of major publisher workshops and free online training. If you just go to like Wiley and Elsevier and Emerald and Taylor and Francis and a host of others that offer a lot of free workshops. Also, a good way to write is if you can go on a breakaway or workshop, where you're just dedicated to write. And then consult experienced researchers, obviously, can help you. Right, so now we get into that was just the introduction. So let's get to really, setting the context, selecting the right journal. So obviously, what's important is the scopes and aims of the journal that you need to consider. So, does your research fit in with this journal? Because the most common letter of rejection that you're going to get from the editor is this journal, your article does not fit the scope of the journal. Although it's a polite way of saying that, look, your research is not good enough, it's not original, or whatever the case. And that's the most common desk rejection I get. Obviously, you need to also consider the different types of articles. So, do they publish original research, case studies? What type of research you need to consider. Um, you need to consider the readership, who reads the article, also the current trends and topics, or what do they focus on. So, the best way is to download, to search that journal for as I mentioned previously, for journal articles that relate to your topic, and then see, based on journals in that specific, based on articles in that specific journal, do they provide you with research gaps and future research recommendations that relate to your topic? Because then it's easy, you can easily justify your publication or acceptance of your journal article by citing those articles and stating that these authors noted a need for your research. Other factors to consider when selecting a journal: who's the editorial board, the impact factor, the journal metrics, so that's quite important, which we'll get to in a slide or two, the international standing, who are the scholars, do they publish original content, what's the peer revision acceptance rejection rate. So you can actually search um, for that specific journal, what percentage do they increase? In some journals, the acceptance rate is like 5% because they receive 10,000 journals a year and they can publish, or even less, they can publish 1% of it. So, the bigger impact journals receive many, many, many submissions, and so they can afford to be selective. So, hence, that's why there may be nothing wrong with your research, but you get rejected just because they just received too many journal articles, and they need to cut it and take only the cutting edge research. A big factor in when selecting your journal is the time to publication. There's some journals you can get those stats and they say from when you submit to when it's published can be 2 years, it can be 3 years. In some cases, like me, it's taken me 3 years to get in a bigger impact journal. It's taken 3 years from when I first submitted to when the article is published. Of course, how relevant is the findings then? But anyway, also you need to consider the page fees and open access. So how much does it cost to publish open access? Is there some relationship with them, which we'll get to in a moment? And also consider journals you previously published in, that you have a good relationship with them. So, and that's why I return to some journals, because I like the way they work and they've got decent impact factors, and, they're not too expensive and they give you good exposure. So I'll always return to a journal that you get a decent number of citations with. So you need to consider that. Most people in reality use a phenomenon that descends the stairs. So everyone tries to get published in the top international journal, but what's usually going to happen is you're going to get desk rejected without any feedback. They just say, sorry, it's not good enough. Sometimes you get lucky and they reject you, but they do send it for peer review, and then they send you valuable feedback, which you can then use to improve the article for your next submission. But most people start at the top international journal, then you may kind of move to some type of topic-specific journal, and then you may move to a local journal. So you start from the top and you work your way down to the lesser journals until you get accepted somewhere. And I've had journal articles literally that I've submitted to 10 different journals, and the article wasn't bad, and the 11th journal then gave you a chance, and by the time I'd implemented all the feedback from those 10 journals, it was a different journal. I could just as well have submitted it back to the first one and it probably would have been accepted. with, but then eventually you will get accepted. So never give up. You can also, now just remember, each time you need to submit to a new journal, it means you've got to meet their formats. You've got to change the structure, you've got to change the referencing, you've got to tweak the topic as well to fit in with that journal scope. So you can get lucky if you submit to like Emerald. Sometimes I submit one article to Emerald, you get rejected for one Emerald journal, but then you submit to another, which means you don't need to change the reference list. But what is very important is to tweak your topic. So, the one journal may focus on developing countries, the other journal may focus on young consumers, the other may focus on technology. So then it's very important to tweak that journal when submitting to a different journal to meet their their scope. So if I submitted to there's a journal called Young Consumer, so my focus was on Gen Z and Y, and now I submit to the African Journal of whatever, developing countries or something like that, then that then I need to, throughout that journal, I need to focus on developing countries because that's the focus, and South Africa because that's the focus of the journal. So remember that is, don't just, if you get rejected one as is, submit your journal article to the next. You need to tweak it to meet the topic, their scope. Then DHET credited journals, there are 69,000 journals on that list. And just to quickly go to the DHE list. So you can see there's Scopus. Scopus, I think, has 29,000 journals. That's a good index to get published in. They have to go through they're very good standard. There's a new list that got added a few years ago, DOAJ. Often journals are listed on multiple indices, but if they just listed on DOAJ, gosh, there's journals there that I would not publish because you can just see they got, sooner or later they're going to be taken off this list if you just look at the standard of work. So, you need to read also, as I say, publications. But look here, if you need to get something published quickly in a hurry, I've got articles published in DOAJ journals, and there are some decent journals, but there are some not decent journals. But I mean, everyone should be able to get their work published initially. If you want an easier place to publish, go DOAJ, unless of course they're indexed on others as well, then it's going to be more difficult. So DOAJ, I mean, Scopus has 29,000 journals. DOAJ, if we go down there, I mean, yeah, they've got, 19,000 odd journals to publish from. IBS is a top ranked index, very strong. There's only roughly 2,000 journals on that. Silos, a lesser index, not many journals there. World of Science, of course, is the international standard. So if you can get published in a World of Science journal, you're doing well. There's roughly 15,000 of them. And then DHET is our local journals. There's not many of them, literally just over 400. So the biggest index, Scopus, is, if you're really starting and you just want to get something published and you've struggled a DOA journal is good. Then you go to Scopus. Then I'd say World of Science and IBS are very good. DHET, you can get published also locally, but there aren't that many journals. So it depends on who your audience is. So yeah, indexes have different sort of ranks, so to speak, and that's just my opinion of them. Okay, word limit is very important in selecting the right journal. So like me, I generally will struggle to write a journal article in 3,000 to 5,000 words. I prefer the longer journal formats, nothing less than 8,000 words for me. It depends. And then you need to consider the reviewer feedback time. As I say, some journals can take a year to give you feedback, and we'll talk about that soon. Journal metrics, and so let's get to the journal metrics. Just to give you some factors, so impact factor score, and I'm just going to give you the definitions of these, but in reality, you won't need to worry about the definition, is the average number of citations per article published in a given year for a journal article, which is divided by the total number of citable articles published over the 2 preceding years for a journal. So often you see a journal with an impact factor of 1, 2, 3, and so it goes all the way up to, hundreds, depending on the nature. But in the business faculty or social sciences, generally, in my opinion, if a journal's got an impact factor, that's good enough for me. A lot of journals don't have impact factors. So, if you get an impact factor of 5 in business, that, in my opinion, is excellent. There are higher ones, but you really struggle to get in them. I think the highest I've got into is around about 7 or 8, and I can't get back into that journal. 10 years later, I've tried. So, yeah, impact factors are good because if it's got an impact factor, it means that there's a chance that your work will get cited. A cite score is another index, is the average citations of a given year of all the papers published over the past 5 years. So that means, again, if it's got a higher cite score, it means it gives you more chance to get it published. Schemago is the scientific prestige, which has to do with the weighted citation values of the article. So if other journals cite a journal that have high impact factors, it rubs off on the journal in which the article is. So if we go to Schemago, let's just show you what that looks like, because I've got, sort of 15 minutes left. And you can get to it also if you just write in for publications and you go year, impact factors and metrics. And here it gives you the various scores. And if you go to the Schemago index, here it gives you all the metrics, H factors, Schemago scores, the prestige. So there's journals with very high factors here. But in this list, in journal rankings, you can search for specific journals. So let's go out of this Schemago here and just go in here. And I always do this in Schemago. And let's go in your Schemago journal and rank. And now I'm looking for a specific journal. Let's say Young Consumers. I've got 2 articles published there recently. I push enter. Obviously, and here we go. It's Emerald. Not all journals are on Schemago, but this is a good index. And here it says its H index is 39, which we'll speak to a bit about later. And here it gives it a rank. So if it's in economics, etc., it's a Q1 ranked journal, which means it's in the top 25% of journals in its subject area, and it's Q2 for this topic. And it gives you similarities of other journals. So if I want to publish in Young Consumers and I don't get accepted, I can take other journals that should be related with related topics. And then it gives you a whole bunch of metrics. It gives you the citations per document. It gives you, various scores. But here it also gives you its SJR score of 0.83, which is nothing compared to the 300. But, you get, my top journal in Young Consumers has 700 citations. So although it doesn't have a huge impact factor, it's, it gives you good exposure. So this Schemago is good just to get some metrics and to see mainly what the Q scores are. So let's just go back to this. The quartiles are, I've jumped the gun, is sort of Q1, Q2. It's in the top 25% of that topic of that journal. And then this is in the top 25%, at least, of the impact factor or cite score. And this is in the top 75% of the impact factor, and Q4 in the top. Of course, many journals don't have a Q factor at all. So if you want to find that, you can go to Schemago, and it's related to its impact factor and cite score. So the top 25% with the highest impact factor and cite scores is Q1. If you get in a Q1 journal, you know you're going to get good citations. Of course, the Schemago I've showed you, and there's a few other indexes. I'm not going to cover that. Journal index list I covered. So, World of Science, IBSS, top indexes, followed by Scopus, then DOAJ. So we've covered that already. Then just the peer review process. So this is very important for when selecting a journal article as well. Generally, they can afford to be picky. They want to select the highest quality manuscripts. So the editor-in-chief first goes through all the manuscripts without sending to the reviewers and rejects research, simply because reviewers are on a volunteer basis, and you can't send them 500 articles a year to review, so they'll only select maybe the top 5-10%. Right. The goal of peer review is obviously to improve the quality of the manuscript. It should include thorough referencing. You should follow ethical principles. So the editors and reviewers, what are they looking for? They're looking for innovative and unique research that makes an original contribution. There is clear research objectives and hypotheses which are supported by adequate literature. There's an apt methodology, there's suitable findings and graphical or tabular presentations, and there are no ethical issues. The peer review process, so once the editor is happy that this can go to peer review, it's sent to 2 to 5 peer reviewers. Generally, the time frame is 1 to 6 months. You get feedback, you make revisions, you send it back and forth. So maybe it starts with major revisions and they send back with more major revisions, then they send back with minor revisions, then eventually they accept the journal article, and then it goes to production, and then you make further changes, and eventually it's first published online, and then later, even though it's published online, it may take 2 years before they allocate a volume or issue number. And only once you receive a volume and issue number can you claim it from DHET. So just take note of this. Also, a question is asked, the reviewer, and my personal experience on this waiting period, sometimes you may not receive feedback for a whole 6 months. Then I generally email them and say, look here, what's happening? It's been 6 months. Sometimes you get a reply, sometimes you don't get a reply. So, if you're waiting to graduate, you can't do that. But what do? Then do you take the journal article and withdraw it and submit elsewhere? Then you wait another 6 months. So you've got to, it depends, you run the risk of the same process again. So my opinion is usually try and contact the editor until you get, feedback. Even if I have to eventually email them every week, I start by emailing like maybe every month, and then I'll increase it until I get a response. So it's not good to withdraw. And now, what do you do with rejection? Well, you need to take each reviewer's feedback as, not as a rejection, but as constructive criticism. And you need to do the best to actually address those comments and then resubmit and see what they say. And generally, the second time, they're not as bad. But sometimes what happens is they can't get the same reviews, and you get new reviewers, and they give you new feedback. So it can be a vicious cycle, but use each feedback as a positive experience, and so that you can make those changes and resubmit. Sometimes you get reviewers' feedback and you get rejected by everyone. Then use that feedback to improve the manuscript. And as I say, by the time you've submitted to 5 manuscripts, you've got a whole new different article. However, if there's feedback that they want to change your methodology from quantitative to qualitative and want you to redo all your findings and redo your research, well, then that's when I withdraw. And sometimes the reviewers may actually accept your paper, and then the editor decides at the end, oh, well, they've accepted it, but we're not going to publish it because it doesn't agree with what our journal's main aim is. And I've had that. All the reviewers accepted your paper, and the editor says, no, you found this finding which is contrary to what the journal stands for. So, you can even get those instances. We get into the end. Yes, last 2 slides. So open access. What is open access? Well, many journals give you this option, and basically you pay a fee so that other people who download your article can access it for free. Anyone can view and read it. It gives you much better exposure, much better citations. If you don't pay that fee, there's article embargoes. So people always have to pay to access your article. So it's best to publish open access if possible. Now, CPUT has a number of partners, and again, if we go to this website and you click here, open access publishing, and here they'll talk about APCs are charged for gold. They'll talk about gold, green, yellow access, you can, it's gold, orange, and yellow access. But here we've got an agreement with Emerald where we have a certain number of journals that we can publish with for free. MDPI, we get a discount. Oxford Press, Science Direct, Springer, Wiley. You need to go into these lists, and they list specific journals that CPUT has a relationship with, or that the publisher has a relationship with in South Africa, and they publish so many journals per year. So if we click on Emerald, full title list, and so Emerald Publishing, they have agreement with, these are the participating organizations in South Africa they have agreement with. And to date, they allowed 165 journals from these institutions can publish open access for free. It's usually like $2,000. And to date, this year, 40 have been published. And I can tell you, I've got 3 of those on mine. So they give you a certain number of articles that we can publish each year from these with Emerald and with others. So if I go back to my slide here, and here's for a very important person to contact is Shanaz Fryers from the library. So if you get an article accepted through Emerald and then you say, look here, we've got a publication agreement, it will be Shanaz that needs to approve it with the publisher. And also if you want to get a list of the journals that are approved, like for example, I've got a list here of Emerald's marketing related journals that are on that list for open access from her. Then I know all of these journals, if I publish in them, then I can get that article published open access and it does not cost me anything. And that just gives you better exposure. So go to those various journals, and those are good publishers that you can get published for free. There are a lot of journals that you can publish for free, but they may not be as good a quality as the Emeralds, the Elsevier's, the Wileys, the Taylor and Francis's, the Oxfords. And the last slide is dealing with rejection. So often they're going to come back, the editor-in-chief is going to come back and say, look here, this article doesn't meet our scope, or it's not relevant to our topic, or a host of other reasons. The content needs to be changed, the methodology is poor, your English is poor, too many errors, doesn't adhere to the format of the journal, or inadequate response to the reviewer's comments are all reasons why they may reject you. Some journals receive up to 5,000 or 10,000 submissions a year. Most of them, maybe only 10% of those will actually go to review. So basically, as I said before, you need to learn and use each reviewer's feedback as your next submission. Make the changes, submit elsewhere. Yeah, treat a rejection as the start of the next submission. Yeah. And that's my personal experience is, eventually, after all of these changes, the article will get accepted there. But never give up, never get despondent. You just need to, be ready to face that objective. And I'll just read you a quote to end off with. So, traits to become a successful academic writer: you need to be readiness to adapt your writing style depending on the writing task at hand. Be able to immerse yourself into literature of your selective discipline. Develop original ideas. It takes meticulous work and dedication to fashion a manuscript. Show courage in subjecting your work to peer review. Display confidence to establish an authoritative writing voice. Exhibit persistence and resilience in the face of constructive criticism and rejection from editors and reviewers. And show humility in that not all of your papers will be similarly good. And then all of these references at the end are resources that you can use, but obviously the research support is a very good resource in itself. And gosh, that was a lot of information I gave you. And we're just before 1 o'clock, so I'm not sure if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Prof. Duffett, for sharing this wealth of knowledge with us. Wow, that was a lot of tips and some really good ideas of when to publish, where not to publish, etc. Does anyone have any questions for Prof. Duffett? Prof, the latest advice I've been giving, because of how long the journals are taking now to get back to authors, is maybe just pick one or two or three journals that you might be interested in that would you think fit the paper, and actually write to the editor beforehand and include your abstract and ask two things. What is your turnaround time, and does this abstract or research fit your journal, instead of wasting months and time, getting the journal into the right journal structure, sending it off, waiting for months before you get an answer saying, sorry, this doesn't align with what our journal publishes. So I think those are, tips that you can also use just to try and save some time and effort in terms
Excellent.
of, yeah.
Excellent
Yeah,
advice. I mean, that's definitely something as time goes by, you get to know the journals, obviously, once you've
yeah,
submitted to
yeah,
many of them. But if you're a new researcher, that's not a bad strategy. Very
yeah.
good. I see
Thanks,
Beverly's
Prof.
got a question.
Yeah, Bev, go.
Hi, good afternoon, Prof. David. Thank you. That was a wealth of knowledge. Um, I get confused about um, publishing journal articles that have got actual research, like taking something from a thesis, and then wanting to just publish when you haven't, like I'm not there yet, but once you do postdoc um, publications. So does everything have to get ethical approval, and um, must there be? I mean, how many times do you just like read and then do like desktop applications, and are they accepted, and do they need ethical approval?
Look
I'm
here,
just a little bit.
yeah, look here, desktop, like if you do a systematic literature review and there's no, in other words, it's just literature and they can get published, obviously, where there's no respondents or anything like that. Always just best just to clear that with the ethics department, just drop them an email and say, look here, this is the research I'm doing, because there may be different levels. You may be getting documents from certain companies, so then that complicates matters. So I think it's always best then just to drop the ethical department a email and say, look here, this is what I'm doing. Does this need ethical clearance or doesn't it? That's what I suggest for sort of desktop research, because there's different levels of desktop research. And especially if it involves getting documents from external companies, then immediately that starts um, raising red flags. So just check with the ethics department. It's just faculty. It's FBMS at, I think it's ethics.ac.za. You can just drop them an email and they'll get back and be able to tell you specifically if you need ethics or not.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if there are any other questions. Yes, Adil. Adil. You can go ahead. You're on mute.
Hi, good day, Prof. Tafet. I'm Adil Abrams, as I'm
Yes.
the branch librarian based on the Newlands campus, and I'm very intrigued and very excited about your presentation, specifically that you brought it back to the library again. So that was exciting. My question to you, Prof, is that the H index. You were speaking about the publications index, and I don't think you brought much attention to the H index, specifically to the publication of articles. And how important is that, especially now we're talking about ranking of institutions, and we always want to see where CPUT and where we are
Yes.
currently with the ranking and the outputs that's going out. So what my question to you is, I think it boils down to, is it where you publish? Because I don't know if that's a very important criteria for where our institution can go as far as the ranking is. And maybe you can just maybe elaborate more on that,
Yes.
maybe for me, please.
Yes. So obviously, you H index, I didn't really cover it, but it's obviously related to the prestige of the journal. So the the bigger the journals, the higher the H index, obviously the more prestige and rankings, the higher the impact factor, the higher the site form, it's better to go for. But in reality, I mean, we try and go for the big journals. But in reality, if you cannot get them published, it's better just obviously to get the journal article published than not published. So, we all want to go for journals as that Schemago. I showed you that index where you can look at the top ranked journals. In reality, you really struggle to get into those top ranked journals, but we should all strive towards it. So, for me, as long as the journal is DHET accredited and it's got some type of impact factor, it's going to make a difference to the university and your rankings at the end of the day. Because how the H index works, by the way, is from a personal perspective, a H index of 10 means that you have published 10 papers that have been published 10 papers that have been cited 10 times each. That's what it means from a personal perspective. So an H index of 20 means you have published 20 journal articles that have been cited 20 times each. And my index actually just went up to 20 last week. And in order to get those citations, you need to publish in journals with decent impact factors and cite scores. So that's not always the case, but it's generally the case. The greater the impact factor and cite scores of these papers, the more chance you have of your paper being cited, which will ultimately then increase your H index and your institution's H index. So the importance of trying to publish in better quality Scopus, IBS, World of Science journals as opposed to the DOAJ and the DHET, not to knock them, because some of them do get good citations, but generally, on the whole, it's to try and get into these better quality publications because you're going to get better citations, which will improve your H index score as an individual, and obviously the more people with high H index scores in the institution, the more prestige the more prestigious, the higher the rankings of the institution in terms of H index. I'm not sure if that kind of covers your question, Adil.
And it did. Thanks, Prof. It did. Thanks so much.
Okay, great. And then Batu, Baba, if you can go for it. Babutundi.
Yeah. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof, for this wonderful presentation. And I think it's going to motivate us and kind of create a nudge in us to publish more and increase our research output. So just a couple of questions. Like, the first one is like the traditional way of ethics process, because when you said from the last question, you made mention that you have to reach out to ethics and say, I'm doing systematic literature review, or I'm doing this kind of research. Will my research, do I need to submit for ethics clearance, or I don't need it? So that process is one of the problem, because if you are using secondary data or publicly available data, let's say GHS. GHS means General Household Survey conducted by Stat SA, which is always annually published by Data First and always publicly available. So there are a lot of publicly available data that people use, and then they cite, they reference the data like a document and also data set. So when you use that, then you are faced with saying, oh, you should submit to ethics approval. Even if it is a student work, we understand, because at least I got like 3 of my students to go through ethics approval with secondary data. Though it was tough because it was difficult, but yeah, we were able to pass through. But as a staff, you are just doing your research, generally publicly available data, and then you are required to submit to ethics for a data that is generally publicly available. So sometimes it's a kind of it's difficult, and it's also not growth enhancing when it's come to publication. This is a business faculty. If you go to other university, they will have data like data stream, Bloomberg, you can write on stock market, on whatever, you are going to find the access to that data through that library. I don't know if you have it at CPUT, but these are publicly available data.
Yeah,
So
Baba
that's one
Tandu.
of those things.
Yeah,
Hello.
let me answer your question, or your statement. You're going to write a journal article in any event. And in writing the journal article pretty much takes the phase of a research proposal. So my suggestion would be, you're going to write the journal article, but that journal article then, if they do, because staff also need ethical clearance, particularly if it's, I'm not saying for publicly available data, but I would always just double check. There's no harm in doing that. But if you've written the article, everything you've got in that article will be pretty much enough for your ethics application in any event. It's not really going to be much extra work should they require it. If they don't require it, it's fine. I know ethics is a stumbling block for many people, but I've also, got papers that I want to write, and my suggest, that maybe you do I've got this postgraduate group and I had a feedback session. So if I want to publish a journal article based on that feedback, because it's now participants, it's not literature, then I would need to get ethical clearance. So what I would best need to do is actually do my literature review, write my introduction, my background to the research problem, write the whole article, and that information you could then just use for ethics. So it's not really going to be much extra work if your goal is to write a journal article, because the information in the article would be enough to populate the proposal. That's provided that you need ethics. I know it takes time and it's effort, but obviously you don't. What's happening is if you get your journal article published and then they come back to you and say, oh, but you didn't get ethical clearance, so therefore we can't claim DHET subsidy or something like that. I mean, those type of things can happen. So it's just always best, in my opinion, just to check. Staff members also do need to submit, but if it's public available data, then you should probably not have to submit. But that's just my answer, is just double check. And you're going to have to write the article. So if you write the article first and then get the ethical clearance if you need it, it's not going to be too much extra work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof, for that comprehensive answer. So just a little bit, another one, though it's not directly to you. It's like if you are writing a research paper, for example, like take for instance some department now, given what is happening in the faculty, they can have like 10 part-time lecturers or 10 part-time staff or contract staffs. So because many are having contract staffs, and there's a policy that was circulating, we don't know how true it is, that you can't go, they can't sponsor your conference, you can't get rebate if you are a contract staff or if you're a part-time lecturer. And then if you are a part-time lecturer, you would rather go look for other university and put the name of your application. So there are many outputs that's supposed to be claimed by CPUT, especially this faculty, that's not being claimed because the incentives are not they are not there for some kind of people. They are being so that's just for the entire thing why some of the outputs may be very reduced. That's what I know about it.
Yeah, I've got an answer for you on that one. So I'm going to this ICB MD conference, and with me, I'm taking a part-time lecturer, and I'm paying for him from my research output so that he can present a paper. Okay, he was my master's student the year before, but he is no longer a student. So my suggestion with those contract staff and part-time staff is to obviously conduct research with someone else, connect with someone else who has research funds, because they're published, and publish with them, not in isolation, or go to conferences with them. So it's partnerships, it's to connect with people that have resources. And as I say, I'm happy to, for my students now, and he's become a part-time staff member. And so, and they didn't need to vet him. Like now, if you want to go on a conference, you go through this whole extensive vetting process. I mean, my vetting process was 80 pages eventually that we submitted. But once you put all the documents together, but he, it's what's the lady's name? It's not Shanaz. I mix the two up all the time. There's another lady who deals with that. She's very helpful. Shafika, there we go. And so she said, okay, because it's a new development staff, I can pay for him and he doesn't need to go through the vetting process. We got the paper accepted. And the only thing that he needed to do was we needed to get a letter from Human Capital for insurance purposes stating that he's a part-time, lecturer. And then he just tagged on with me with all of my documents. So for developmental processes, Shafiq is very helpful. And then you can, as long as you've got someone else with funds that you collaborate with, then those people have those opportunities. It's just a matter of them hooking up with a senior researcher in that department to do the research, and then they'll be able to go to conferences, be able to get their page fees paid if they collaborate with others who have the means. So that would be my suggestion for those people.
Thank you, Prof. That was comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Duffett. Are there any other questions or discussion points? Thank you very much, Prof, for spending your lunch with us. We really do appreciate it. And thank you to all faculty colleagues for joining us today.